the 6 key characteristics of learning. Learning is unitary, which is the learner responds as a whole person in a unified way to the whole situation. In other words, a learner responds based on how he or she think, feel, and act to a certain situation. Learning is social, which means the learner's response to the environment in which there are other individuals and physical things or objects. Or simply, learners can respond by observing other people. They take part in communities of practice that influence their identities. Learning is individual. Each learner is unique and has needs and problems like others. Simply put, in these characteristics, the educator need to consider each learner's differences, interests, and abilities. Learning is self-active. From the root word self, learning is a personal process. It includes listening, visualizing, recalling, memorizing, and reasoning using your judgment and thinking. Learning is purposive. That means learning is moving toward a goal or end result. Simply, we wanted to learn to know something different. That is what we mean learning is purposive. Learning is creative. Simply it means that when a learner learns something new, their creativity develops because of their knowledge and experiences. Learning is transferable. It means that whatever is learned in one context or situation will also apply in other contexts or situation. It implies that the educator must be very careful in giving an accurate information.
Steps and learning. So when we say steps on learning, it is learning from our experience and verbalizing the outcomes. It is analyzing our actions and applying concepts and theories to problems, applying previous experience to new situations, or challenging our assumptions. As a member of your community, you have been living closely with mothers and children, and you will have also observed how children explore and learn from their surroundings. Based on that, you can get some useful ideas about learning by thinking about how babies and young children learn. They often have confidence in themselves and are still full of joy of learning. We have also steps in childhood learning. The first steps is observation or watching very carefully. Next is they also try to use other sensing methods like listening, touching, or tasting. Also, they will start to ask why or how when something happens. The next step is to imitate or copy the same action, saying, let me do it myself. Learning takes place by repeating the actions again and again. Children usually start to ask others to observe them so they can show that they are able to do the activity they have just learned, perform the action for themselves, and having learned something.
Principles of adult learning. Most of the time, adults follow the same generational pattern of learning as children do. But while there are similarities between child and adult learning, there are also additional features of learning. Principles of learning, also known as laws of learning, are readiness, exercise, effect, primacy, recency, intensity, and freedom. First, the readiness implies a degree of willingness and eagerness of an individual to learn something new. Individuals learn best when they are physically, mentally, and emotionally ready to learn, and they do not learn well if they see no reason for learning. If we want to learn something new na makakatulong sa ating pag-grow as individual, dapat always tayong ready at nandun yung willingness natin na matuto. Second, exercise. The principle of exercise states that those things are the most often repeated are the ones that are the best remembered. Your audience will learn best and retain information longer when they have meaningful practice and repetition. May mga tao na madali makalimot at hindi lahat ay fast learner, kaya dapat i-practice natin yung principles of exercise in learning. Third, effect. The principle of effect is the learning is strengthened when accompanied by a pleasant or satisfying feeling, and that learning is weakened when associated at an unpleasant feeling, which means that the learner will strive to continue learning as long as it provides a pleasant effect. Fourth, primacy. The state of being first often creates a strong impression which may be very difficult to change. Things learned first creating a strong impression in the mind that is difficult to erase. The learner's first experience should be positive, functional, and lay the foundation for all that is to follow. Number 5 is the recency. The principle of recency states that things most recently learned are the best remembered. Conversely, the further a learner is removed time-wise from a new fact or understanding, the more difficult is to remember. For example, mas madali nating matandaan ang lesson ngayon na pinag-aaralan natin kaysa sa naituro o napag-aralan natin last year. Information acquired most recently generally is remembered best. Frequent review and summarizing will help fixing in the audience mind topic that have been covered. Number 6, intensity. The more intense the material taught, the more likely it will be retained. A sharp, clear, dramatic, or exciting learning experience teaches more than a routine or boring experience. The principle of intensity implies that a learner will learn more from the real thing from a substitute. Likewise, a learner is likely to gain greater understanding of tasks by performing them, rather than merely reading about them. The more immediate and dramatic the learning is to a real situation, the more impressive the learning is upon the learner. Number 7, the freedom. The principle of freedom states that things freely learned are best learned. Conversely, if the audience is forced to learn something, the more difficult it is for them to learn. Compulsion and forcing are no favorable for personal growth. For example, if you force the family to construct a latrine in their compound, they may not be interested to do that. However, if you motivate them to do that through proper education of the family, they are more likely to construct the latrine and use them properly.
So what factors affecting learning? As you plan and carry out your health education session, you should be aware of the factors that affect the learning process. This may be classified into 4 categories, which is physiological factors, psychological factors, environmental factors, and teaching methodology. So the first is, what is physiological factors? The physiological factors include how people feel, their physical health, and their levels of fatigue at the time of learning, the quality of the food and drink they have consumed, their age, and etc. In addition, physiological factors are things related to your physical body that affect your thinking. For example is, when your body chemistry is off due to the unbalanced nutrition, dehydration, alcohol, and etc., the neurotransmitters that control your thinking processes can be affected. Physiological factors also include changes to the brain's structure due to injuries and extended periods of inactivity. Or physical stress, and physiological factors influence the human condition because they are the underlying process that affect thoughts and other psychological factors. Physiological factors directly influence one's experience in the world. What are psychological factors? These factors are formulated in the mind, most commonly referred to as thoughts, but they can also be other abstract concepts such as pain or depression. Depression and anxiety are some of the most common psychological factors to influence cognition by causing an individual to have more negative interpretations of the world. The main characteristic of psychological factors involve aspects of one lifestyle like work and stress and personality traits. Psychological factors such as mental ill, health or mental tension and conflict all hamper learning. A related psychological factors is motivation, no learning at all. Motivation can energize, select, and direct positive behavior. In general, for motivation to take place in health education, session learning should be purposeful and meaningful, and the audience should be interested in the health issue being discussed during the session. Encouragement and praise stimulate learning of health-related skills. You will need to encourage the people to whom you are giving your health education message.
Environmental factors. Several factors can affect learning ability, including seating, light, noise, and even color. Students who study in a positive learning environment have been shown to be more motivated, engaged, and have a higher overall learning ability. On the other hand, students learning in poor environments, those that are uncomfortable, loud, or full of distractions, will find it far more difficult to absorb information and stay engaged. Environmental factors that influence learning. First, relationships. A teacher who builds positive relationship with students decrease the affective filter or level of discomfort in the classroom, and students perform better. Stress. A little bit of stress can be good as the body releases adrenaline to address, in which in turn stimulate our brain to fight on all cylinders. Sleep. Students need 9 to 13 hours of sleep per night. Sleep helps the brain to learn and process new informations. Exercise. Recommend 2 hours of sweaty exercise per day for the young brain. Nutrition. Eating healthy foods allows our bodies to function at the highest level. Laughter. Way to increase success. Teaching methodology. Different types of teaching methods. Types of teaching methods include differentiated instructions, lecture-based instructions, technology-based learning, group learning, and individual learning, inquiry-based learning, kinesthetic learning, game-based learning, and expeditionary learning. When we talk about the characteristics of learning, we refer to self-active learning. Learning by doing is one very good way of active learning. Learning teaching methods can help engage in the learning be more interactive, relevant, and meaningful.
One of the theories of learning is behaviorism learning theory. So when we say behaviorism learning theory, is the central tenet of behaviorism is that all actions are thought through interactions with the environment. According to this learning theory, environmental circumstances have a much greater influence on behavior than innate or inherent traits. A common example of behaviorism learning theory is positive reinforcement.
Cognitivism or cognitive learning theory was founded by Jean Piaget in 1930s as a reaction to prevalent behaviorist school of psychology. Cognitive learning theory explained how internal and external factors influence an individual mental process to supplement the learning. The learner will builds upon his or her previous experience and understanding to construct a new understanding. The cognitism explained that mind is considered as an information processor like a computer, which is the mind receives the information, organizes the information, then uses the information to produce learning outcome. According to Piaget, there are 3 vital steps to mastering cognitive learning. These are: first, accommodation. taking new information into account by modifying what we already know. Second, assimilation, arranging new information inside our heads alongside what we already know. And lastly, equilibration, balancing what we already know with the information we are trying to acquire.
Constructivism learning theory, the theory that says learners construct knowledge rather than just passively take in information. It's important in teaching and learning because it promotes social and communication skills by creating a classroom environment that emphasizes collaboration and exchange of ideas. Example, an elementary school teacher presents a class problem to measure the length of the Mayflower rather than steering the problem by introducing the roller. These teachers allow students to reflect and to construct their own methods of measurements.
Humanism learning theory. This theory is closely related to constructivism in adult learning theory and states that learning is a natural desire with the ultimate goal of achieving self-actualization. In addition, Maslow in humanistic psychology suggests that students are inherently good and will make good decisions when all their needs are met. Humanistic psychology focuses on the idea that learners bring out the best in themselves and that humans are driven by their feelings more than rewards and punishment.
Connectivism learning theory. Connectivism is a relatively new learning theory that suggests students should combine thoughts, theories, and general information in the useful manner, and accept that technology is a major part of the learning process and that our constant connectedness gives us opportunities to make choices about our learning. And it also promotes group collaborations and discussions, allowing for different viewpoints and perspective when it comes to decision making, problem solving, and making sense of information. Connectivism promotes learning that happens outside of an individual, such as through social media, online networks, blogs, or information databases.
Social work practitioners have a moral, ethical, and legal responsibility to challenge inequality and disadvantage. Black feminists taught us a dynamic perspective that analyzes human interactions based on principles of equality and considers the interconnections between the major social divisions of class, race, gender, disability, sexuality, and age. This chapter explores how a theorized social work practice informed by anti-oppressive principles can be used to address the inequalities of oppressions that determine the life chances of services users. Yung mga social work practitioner ay may responsibility na aralin ang mga inequalities at disadvantage ng isang lipunan o lugar. Kumbaga parang in-explore nila kung paano ba yung theory nila para maayos yung discrimination.
Anti-oppressive practice recognizes the oppression that exists in our society and aims to mitigate the effects of oppressions and eventually equalize the power imbalances that exist between people. It also recognizes that all forms of oppression are interconnected, include racism, sexism, ableism, colonialism, and other isms. This framework should seek to guide the Federation work with an aims to identify strategies and solutions to this contract power in order to mitigate and address systematic inequalities that often operate simultaneously and unconsciously at the individual, group, and institutional or onion level.
Anti-oppressive theories. Anti-oppressive theory and practice serves as an appropriate and effective framework for social work education that is uniquely suited to realizing the mission and potential of social work in light of current social and political realities. This theory and practice represent a commitment to social justice and social change within social work. According to Dominic Lee, anti-oppression is a methodology that focusing both process and outcome and a way of structuring relationship between individuals that aim to empower users by reducing the negative effects of hierarchy in their immediate interaction and the work they do together. The impressive principle of flexibility demands that workers continually consider the ways in which their own social identity and values affect the information they gather. This includes their understanding of the social world as experienced by themselves and those with whom they work. For example, ang isang babae ay nakakaranas or tinatrato in a sexist way or nakakaranas ng racism dahil sa color. Ang anti-oppressive practice ay tumutulong kasama ang service user to include them in facilitating a user-led and user-controlled service. What is user-led organization? User-led organization is defined as an organization who use support services including disabled people, people who use mental health services, people with learning disabilities, older people, and their families in care. This is under Social Care Institute for Excellence 2009. User-controlled services, it includes that services users decide what and how they want things done, or that the majority of the controlling group of an organization are users of the organization or members of the group for whom it was set up, or it is the organization that strive to work from an equalities approach to service users.
Key principles of anti-oppressive practice. Anti-oppressive practice values the contribution of community institutional change processes in achieving broader social change. As such, social workers embody principles of social justice activism by working to not only provide services to service users, but to also raise the consciousness of those they are working with, to internalize their problems, and to understand how social inequality and structures of oppression work to create disadvantaged life circumstances in areas like housing, employment, healthcare, and education. AOP reconciles and provides a path to link social work, theories, and values with practice, utilizing 5 critical practice principles. Number 1. Critical reflection on self in practice. Social work is an inherently political role. It allows social workers to occupy a position of power and privilege via their access to resources and hierarchical structure of the social service sector. Therefore, it is crucial for social workers to be critically reflexive to avoid recreating oppressive social relationship in practice. Asking ourselves questions like, how does my social location create position of privilege, and how many social divisions impact my ability to best meet these services users' needs, can create the foundation for reflection on how our own biography shape and recreate power differentials in our practice. It is also important to note that while social workers occupy a position of power in a therapeutic relationship, one's identity and social locations are dynamic and heavily dependent on the context one is in. For example, a racialized female social worker working with a white male service user might navigate power differential based on her race and gender positions that do not reflect normative service provider powers imbalances. Number 2. Critical assessment of service users' experience of oppression. Critical social workers strives to comprehensively understand the diversity and multiplicity of oppression in service users' lives, personal, cultural, and instructional. Process each shape individual problems in the access they have the solutions, critically analyzing the intersections of oppression such as gender, class, and race. Allow us to understand how macro level policies, discourse, and processes impact survey users' lives. Similarly, this critical analysis must also be turned inward to understand how social work, discourse, and language use in framing of problems can contribute to sustain oppressive power structures.
The number 3 key principles of anti-oppressive practice is empowering service users. Empowering service users is one of the central tenets of AOP and strives to create empowerment processes both at the interpersonal and institutional level. At the interpersonal level, the process of externalizing structural oppression is key to being able to deconstruct experiences and recognize how social forces impact service users' lives. This process allows people to see the true nature of their circumstances by analyzing the structures and institutions that impact and influence their ability for social mobility, economic prosperity, and educational attainment. At the institutional level, anti-oppressive social workers promote changes to the organization and delivery of services in ways that enhance anti-oppressive practice and service users' control. Practical ways to promote empowerment include ensuring that services users' views and stated needs are incorporated into assessment and solution options. The number 4, working in partnership. AOP prioritizes working in partnership with service users through collaborative efforts that position the service user as the expert in their own life. Consequently, service users must be included as much as possible in the decision-making processes that impact their life. This is achieved through a deliberate sharing of power and a commitment to transparency where the service user has the full information and awareness of the circumstances to make decisions in their best interest. Working in partnership attempts to balance unequal power dynamics by working against hierarchical structure to create a supportive environment where the service user is able to access the necessary resources and information to work collaboratively with a social worker. The last one is the minimal intervention. A key principle of AOP is reducing oppressive and disempowering situations in social work, and that by Haley 2014. Utilizing AOP in social work means minimizing opportunities of social control by strategically intervening the least intrusive in a way possible in the service user's life. Early intervention and an emphasis on preventative services contributive to minimal intervention and less disruption in service users' lives.